Good morning, class. Today is Monday, March 23rd, as you can see. And I wanted to begin by just taking a look at the stats. You could see that things have dramatically changed since the beginning of the year when we started, our notebook and started tracking this stuff. You can see the Dow and the S&P are tremendously lower than they've been in the last month or so. Oil has almost dropped in half since the beginning of the year. Things are really changing. And although this is not personal finance Friday, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of knowing what's going on. There are a lot of people in America today who have a lot of their retirement in these types of investments in their 401k plans. And if you're looking to retire in the next couple of years, you may not see the gains come back. The money you lost over the last month or so, if you need your money next month or next year, you may never see that come back. Now, someone like me who's very young in his 20s, 30s, 40s, well, you get the point. Someone like me, I don't need the money next year. I don't need the money 2 years from now. So I have a lot of time for all the losses, and believe it, I've had a lot of losses in my retirement plans. I have time for that to come back up, and that's why it's really important for you to understand this. Now, obviously, you can't predict the future, but if anyone was in their retirement, getting close to retirement, and they were worried that what was coming down the road might impact the stock market, then they probably would have been wise to move it into something very safe. But a lot of people, quite frankly, don't understand how that works. The other interesting thing is, someone asked me about this yesterday. We were working on this a couple of weeks ago, where our tax dollars go, and we said a lot of it goes to paying health costs and the military and things like that. And I asked you to tell me where you would allocate more money. Where would you adjust the allocation across the board? And what's interesting is a lot of you did say science, and I think we're going to see a major push because of what's going on with the coronavirus. The other thing is, when we went down here and we said, what were the major events that happened in the United States? I think it would be pretty safe to say that we could add the coronavirus as a major occurrence of the last 100 years that is going to impact federal spending. If you look at this number here, $23 trillion, the president and Congress, they're looking at already spending $1.2 trillion as a relief package for all the economic consequences of this virus. And some people even speculating as high as $2 trillion, which is quite a lot of money. All right. Now, just getting on with today's review of last Friday's assignment and today's assignment, I can tell from some of the questions I'm getting about instructions on how to do things that some of you are not watching the videos throughout. It's very important that as we go through this virtual home instruction phase, that you are taking your education seriously. There's not a whole lot that we have control over during this period, but what we do have control over is doing the right thing and taking the steps to make sure that this time is not going wasted. There's a lot of things we can't do, but something that we certainly can do is we can really take our education seriously. And as I said on Friday, there are quite a bit of students, many students, that I can tell that they are doing their work and they are doing it with 100% effort, and it's obvious. And then there are some kids that I see are turning their documents in at 11:30 p.m. after midnight. And what that means to me is that you're procrastinating, leaving it till the end of the day and rushing through. And obviously, I've said this before, what you get out of something is what you put into it. So let's stay on task and let's stay focused, and let's review last Friday's assignment. So the first part of the assignment was to take a look at this employment statement. Now, this pay stub, it's broken down very nicely. Gross wages, health, dental, retirement. When you get older and you actually get your own pay stub, you will see that oftentimes these things have codes and they may not necessarily spell out retirement. So it's really important that when you get your first pay stub, that you understand what the different codes are and where the money's going. So this way you can look it over, review it, and make sure you're getting paid appropriately. Listen, people make mistakes. Things get inputted inaccurately into the system. So you want to make sure that what is going on with your pay stub reflects what should be going on. First question was really easy. Hope's employer deposits her paycheck directly into her checking account. And of course, that would be the net pay. That's $284.79. The next question said, about how frequently does Hope receive a paycheck? Well, that is going to be what is called the current pay period. The current pay period goes from 5/1 to 5/14. We know that, 5/15. We know that is 2 weeks. So she gets paid every 2 weeks. Which of the following statements are true? Hope actually received her pay on the last day of the pay period. Well, the reason we know that's not true is because the last day of the pay period is 5/15. She got paid on 5/21. So she got paid approximately 6 days after the end of the pay period. So that's not true. Her net pay was not $600. As we said, that was her gross pay, which is right here, the current total. Next, we have Hope's net pay for this pay period was $284. That's true. So that's correct. Hope paid $76.58 in health insurance, and that is here as well. Now, just to reiterate something, current total is how much was paid or received in a particular time period. The time period here is 2 weeks. So simple division, if you take this, divide it by that, you would come out with, and I'm going to do it right now. Well, I've already done it, but it comes out to 9. And that would be across the board. So 540 divided by 60 is 9, et cetera, et cetera. So what that would tell you is that this is her 9th paycheck of the year. Which of the following benefits does Hope pay for through payroll deduction? Retirement, health, and dental. Yes. Just so you know, there are some companies that will give you tuition reimbursement. That would not be on your pay stub as a deduction because they're not deducting that from you. They're actually giving that to you. So you might see it on a pay stub, but it wouldn't be as a deduction. What was the total amount deducted from Hope's paycheck, from her latest paycheck? And I think this might actually be a little eye-opening to you. If you're getting paid a gross amount, current total, $600, and your deductions is $315.21, that is a lot of money. And that is right here. So those are her total deductions. That's why, again, her net check was approximately $284. So Hope's contribution to her retirement plan is pre-tax. That is one of the benefits of putting your money into a 401k plan, and you really need to pay attention to this one here. It's pre-tax. So what does that mean? That means when she was taxed on her gross wages, those contributions to her health plan, her retirement plan, were not taxed. If they were taxed, then she wouldn't really have $60. She would have $60 minus whatever was left. So let's say her tax rate was $60, 10% or $60. That means she would only have approximately for that pay period, she'd only have $54 to contribute. Well, since this money comes out of your paycheck, out of your gross salary, before you get taxed, it actually gives you more money to save. Furthermore, for each pay period, she is essentially making $60 less per paycheck. So although her gross wages are $600, if you minus the $60, that means her taxable wages would be, just considering this, $540, which means that she would ultimately pay less taxes because you get you get taxed on how much you make. So if the federal government considers you only making $540 because you made a pre-tax contribution to your retirement plan, that of course is beneficial. What is the largest? Oh, but by the way, let me just go back to this for a second here. It is not mandatory. When you have a retirement plan, that is your retirement. And again, it's up to you whether or not you wisely save. Is taxed at a rate of 15%? Again, it's pre-tax. It's not taxed at all until later on when you take it out of the 401k plan or wherever you put it. What is the largest deduction? 99% of the time, it's going to be the federal tax. And if one of Hope's coworkers quits and Hope works 60 hours instead of 40, that means she's going to make more money. If she makes more money, the government's going to take more taxes. And it really has nothing to do with whether or not Hope's coworker quits. If Hope is working more hours or is making more money, she is going to pay more taxes. Which of the following statements are true? Hope has contributed $540 to her retirement plan, and she has paid $810 in federal taxes. Those two items are both true. You could see that right here. $540 towards retirement, $810 towards her federal taxes. Okay, this section here is the terminology piece, and you had to put the terms in there with the definitions. And some of the definitions I took pretty much word for word from the website. Some I simply elaborated on. So, for example, wage, this is your rate, rather, this is your wage or the amount you get paid for a specific time period. For example, my rate is $10 per hour. That's if you're paid hourly, if that's your rate. Or you could even say my rate is $25,000 per year, regardless of how many hours you work. A lot of managers get paid this way. So if you see a manager at McDonald's, chances are they are getting an annual rate versus an hourly rate. So when you get a chance, of course, I'll post this. Go through these and make sure you understand these. Once again, with the current, a current refers to a time period. It could be your current paycheck covers a week. Your current paycheck can cover a month, and so on and so forth. This is important. This was in the video. Your allowance. The more allowances you have, the more money that comes out of your paycheck. Excuse me, back that up. The more allowances you have, the less deductions that come out of your paycheck. So if you have 5 kids, you're going to have more allowances, which means you're going to pay less taxes, and therefore your company is going to take less money out of your paycheck. And the way your company knows that is through the W-4 that you complete. All right, reading a pay stub. We did this activity on Friday together. That was activity number 2. So I'm not going to go over all this once again, but this was all here. But activity number 3. Now, as I went through this, and I put my answers here, I tried to give complete answers, just so this way it keeps reinforcing the material. So, and again, I'm not going to go through every one of these because a lot of this is just math. I do want to go over number 5, because in the end, when you are determining how much money you actually have to spend, whether it's on a weekly basis or on an annual basis when completing your budget, you can't go by your gross pay, because your gross pay is not going to help you. What you really need to go by is your net pay. When making a budget, what figure should you use to predict how much money you have to spend? You need to go by your net pay, because that's actually how much will be in your checking account. So these are the answers. And again, I spelled, I didn't just put the numbers. Some kids will even put A, B, C, D, or whatever the answer was. But again, I believe if you write it out, it reinforces the terminology, it reinforces what we're talking about, and so on. So when you get a chance, go over this to make sure all your answers are correct. Now, let's go on with today's lesson. today's lesson is going to be more about the abolition movement, but why did it take so long? If we go back and we see that there were many abolitionists like the Grimke sisters and so on and so forth that were fighting for abolition, why did it take so long? Now, someone called me out on the 1820s year here versus 1830s. The Grimke sisters moved up to Philly in the 20s. And the reason why I put abolitionists in the 20s and not the 30s is because that's when they really made a determination that they were going to go up north and start to fight for justice with regard to slavery. So that's kind of why I don't really get into dates so much, because what you consider her to be, the sisters to be an abolitionist, or what I consider them to be an abolitionist when they took the first step and gave up everything and made that major commitment, that might vary. Certain things, of course, 1776, we declared independence. There's no debating that, things like that. This was the era when I was filling out the form. As I'm typing away, I typed that Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Google Doc. I typed that it was 1952. Obviously, it's 1852. That was just a typo, and I realized it after I published the video. Now, again, the question is, if these ladies and gentlemen made such brave contributions, why did it take so long? If you're talking about the Grimke sisters or Sojourner Truth in 1827, if you talk about these people in the 20s working so hard, why is it that slavery does not get abolished until 1865? Well, we know that thanks to their work, slavery was bound to be abolished, but there's a few good explanations as to why it would take so long. Slavery, as we talked about earlier, was perhaps the biggest sectional division in the country. You had the North, who were opposed to it, the South, who supported it, and as we've talked about, the government tried to take steps to keep the country united despite the differences. And we can reflect back to 1820 with the Missouri Compromise, which said any states above the 38th parallel would be free. Any states below the 38th parallel would be a slave state. And so the government is obviously trying to address this issue. But why is it an issue? Why is the South so reluctant to give up this very, very disgusting system of economy? And it comes down to the fact that cotton is king. Cotton again becomes very much in demand, as we talked about when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, when Eli Whitney in the late 1700s comes up with the cotton gin and a way to extract the cotton from the cotton seeds. And so because of that, you're going to see the Southern economy really, really boom based on cotton sales, not only in the United States, but around the world. And the document that I gave you today from Khan Academy is going to go into some of those details. I'm not going to go into it right now, but some of those details as to just how much cotton the United States produced in the Deep South. Now, even though there was something called slavocracy, many Southerners held the same beliefs. So first of all, let me just briefly tell you what slavocracy is. Slavocracy is the idea that although cotton is king, most people in the South are not going to reap the great financial rewards of the sale of cotton. But nevertheless, many people still held the same beliefs. They still believed in white supremacy. They still believed in, the social differences between whites and blacks. So even though they knew they would not become filthy rich like the big cotton plantation owners, they still believed in this idea of white supremacy and keeping the social order. What you see here is Southern states really trying to, of course, they want to hold on to their wealth. And the way they do that is they fall on a few principles that we find in the Constitution of the United States. And we talked about this early in the year. There were 4 principles, and 2 of these principles included popular sovereignty and federalism. Popular sovereignty is the belief that the government's power comes from the people. So if the people want a certain thing, the government should act appropriately. That is, the people that put the government officials in power, and therefore the government officials, through this thing called representative democracy, should fulfill the wishes of the people. So in the South, if the people of these southern states believed in slavery, believed in a social order, social structure where whites are superior and therefore slaves can remain as slaves, then these southern governments are going to act on this. That ties in with federalism. Remember, federalism is a system of government where the federal government and the states share power. So these southern states say, well, if the people under popular sovereignty want to maintain the system of slavery, then we should be allowed to, because we as independent states believe in slavery, and therefore we should have control over whether or not we have slavery. And again, that's why you will see, despite the push to end slavery, the federal government will do things like the Missouri Compromise just to kind of keep everyone happy. This, as I've talked to you in class, is something called kicking the can down the road. There is an issue, a major bad issue that needs to be addressed, and that is slavery. But the federal government, and it's not only with the Missouri Compromise, and we'll see in the next class how other compromises further kick the can down the road, but it does get kicked down the can. The can does get kicked down the road, and then slavery doesn't get abolished until 1865. Now, some people say, well, what about the Emancipation Proclamation? I know you're all raising your hands right now saying, Mr. Davis, what about the Emancipation Proclamation? Well, yes, that was important. That was in 1863. But that really did not end slavery in the United States. What Abraham Lincoln did was he was basically saying, and I quote, all persons held as slaves, unquote, shall be free. But there's other clauses in that Emancipation Proclamation that make it clear that he was only talking about the slaves that were under the control of the rebellion states. And part of the significance of this was there was really a number of reasons why this Emancipation Proclamation was so important. Well, one, it rallied the Northern troops. They finally said, now we have something really worth fighting for, the end of slavery. The other thing is there's something in the proclamation that allows African Americans to join on the side of the Union troops. And you'll see roughly 200,000 U.S. troops are African Americans. So now you have African Americans fighting for their own freedom. So yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation is a major historical document. It's really important, but it does not end slavery across the board. It's not until 1865. The 14th Amendment will actually make former slaves citizens, and then the 15th Amendment in 1870 will give African American males the right to vote. And we've talked about this. Women don't get the right to vote until 1920 with the 19th Amendment. That's right. All right. Now, before we close, I just want to go over what activities you have on the table. So the first thing you'll do for today's daily activity is read the article on Khan Academy that I am going to share with you, and complete the very brief questions that go along with that document. Use the rest of your 25 minutes or so to work on your second grade awakening assessment. Remember, that assessment is due Friday. Do not turn in the rubric until you are complete with the assessment itself. So if you are doing the poster, the Google Drawings poster, when you share it with me at the same time, turn in the rubric. If you are doing the Google slide, then do not share the rubric until you post or copy and paste your slide to the class slideshow. I will post a slideshow divided into 3 sections, and you put it into the slideshow where you believe it belongs. The last thing you could work on, and you're not required to work on this, I'm going to share Mr. McManus found a Twitter, he found this on Twitter. It's a journal entry task. This is going to be extra credit. I know a lot of students at the end of the marking period will say, Mr. Davis, my grade's not where I want to be. Can you assign some extra credit? Well, yes, here it is. This will be extra credit towards the fourth marking period. Basically what this task is, it's a primary source document task. Remember, a lot of things I try to give you are primary sources, which illustrate how people felt back then, what they were thinking, their reactions, their emotions, etc., etc. I'm going to ask you to complete this journal at least 3 entries per week. The instructions are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not even going to waste time going into it with you. I'm just going to share the document. If you have any questions, you post it. But basically, you and I and your families, we are going through a very, very historical moment in time. There's no doubt about it. And what you and I believe and what you and I feel is going to tell a whole lot more to generations down the road than what is written in the textbooks, if there are textbooks. People down the road, future generations, your children, your grandchildren, little kids that are 1 or 2 and really don't get what's going on, they will read your words and get a very good understanding of what you and I are going through. The nervousness, the changes, whatever you may be going through. So again, this is voluntary. Maybe it'll help you just figure out how you feel. Maybe it'll be, just something for you to do, constructive. But then again, you can use it down the road for extra credit. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And if you have, as always, any questions about anything, please let me know. I hope you have a great day. I hope you had a nice weekend, and continue with the hard work. And again, as a teacher, I really appreciate seeing the really, really good work, and I'm really impressed. So have a great day.